Hey everybody, I'm Anna McEwen. And now for Bob Switzer with the epic narrative.
And welcome back to the epic narrative. We are about, as I said last week, we're about to go into one of those iconic love stories. Ruth and Esther are probably two of the biggest, most well-known, most researched, most conference speaker oriented topics, especially for women. But preachers, they love it. They love both these because they are about women, and it gives them a chance to talk about girls if you're a guy. And they break up nicely into like 4 or 5 episodes or 4 or 5 seminars or conference, whatever. It's all good. And so I'm not going to pretend that, that a lot of you haven't already been through Ruth. You maybe read 3 or 4 book studies on it. You've been part of life groups on it. You've done inductive Bible studies for 17 weeks on, like some of you know Ruth better than I do, and that's all right. I'm okay with that. And if you end up writing me and saying, "Hey Bob, you forgot this. Hey Bob, you forgot this," that's fine. I'm willing to learn. Just feel free to send me that for all the information I forgot or didn't look up or didn't get to. Because on the epic narrative, our main goal is to find that God's been good all through time. And so as we tell these stories, we're looking at that. And so we get opportunity for that in all these stories because so many of these stories blame God for things like we did in the last one, which to me was so ridiculous. If you remember, they blame God for making them wipe out the tribe of Benjamin. It's just insane. It's insane. All right. Verse 1 of Ruth. In the days when judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. Let's just stop there. In the days of the judges. Now, the specific judge is not mentioned. So the exact time of Ruth is unknown. Which probably means the author, which many people believe it was Samuel, the author doesn't know the exact time of this story either. It's an important story, and you would think he'd know, and he knows it's important enough to record because I'm sure there were other stories during those years of the judges that he could have wrote, but he wrote this one because of the illustration of all kinds of stuff. One of them being this idea of being a redeemer and keeping someone, and keeping a heritage alive. Excuse me. I know. Some of you are like, man, he's been 5 weeks. He's still got that allergy stuff. Yes, it's true. It's not as bad as it was. Remember that one? Oh my word, a few weeks ago. Holy cow. That was a tough episode to get through, even just listening to it. But I'll try and keep my swallowing as limited as possible. But anyways, we don't know an exact time. The guess as to when Ruth took place, not when it was written, but when it took place, is based on kind of the birth of David. That, it came from Boaz, and Ruth gave birth to Jesse. Jesse and his wife gave birth to David. Of course, David was the 8th child. So we have at least, David was not back to back. So we have some time. Anyways, you got probably at least 10 years after the marriage David was born, but you also have his sisters involved. So who knows? That's the bottom line. It's a guess as to when Ruth was written. So probably this took place in the last 100 years of the time of the judges. And again, that's based on the birth of David. So that's their best guess. Sometime during the last 100 years of judges. And I mentioned that last week as well. A lot of people believe that episode that we talked about last week probably took place about 50 years before Saul and about 100 years before David. So Ruth is taking place in that same 100 years. If you could call 100 years, a short time period, it's not. I mean, I turned 60 this week. I mean, at the time of this recording, which is months before you'll hear it. So by the time you hear this, have been 60 for a while. But that seems like I've been around a long time. A lot has changed. I don't know if 100 years is a short period of time. But anyways, that's about when people think this all took place. And again, most people believe Samuel is recounting this information. And so we will move on. In those days, when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. Now, famine is always seen as a judgment from God. That God causes the famine to teach people a lesson. Now, I don't believe God does it. Now, will hunger get your attention? Absolutely. A lot of you call out to God if your lunch is late. If you're standing at Chick-fil-A and the line is too long, you're just praying to Jesus to move things along, because you will not make it through the next 20 minutes if you have to wait much longer. So you can imagine what an actual famine must be like. Oh, so yeah. I do understand that culturally you look at famine and you say, God, this is all like God's doing this to me. It feels like God's doing it to you because it looks so catastrophic. It impacts everyone. Nobody has water. Everybody's crops, failed to produce fruit the year before. All the surplus is gone. People's money is starting to run out. Like it's a big deal. So when you look at famine, of course, I believe the enemy brings this, takes advantage of things. You reap what you sow. The culture, my goodness, if we didn't learn about the culture of this promised land, of how the culture of the 12 tribes of Israel had turned into genocide and murder and rape and absolute devaluation of half the race because they're female. Like there's so many access points for the enemy to come in and cause famine. It's ridiculous. But if you have a slave mentality, you're going to blame it all on God and be like, well, the master has done it again. He's done something to destroy us because we've done something really bad. Now, this could have it could have been caused by the Midianites pillaging and raping and stealing all the crops, but that didn't matter. No. It's still God's fault. Still God's fault. All right, so we'll go on from the. Oh yeah, so the rest of verse 1. I couldn't find my place, Bob. Yeah, it's because I hadn't even gone through an entire verse yet. Crazy but true. Here we are, 8 minutes in. I still haven't gone through a verse. In the days when judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, or Judea, however you want to say it, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi. The names of the 2 sons were Mahalon and Kilion. What accent was that? That was not Middle Eastern. What did you? I don't know either. That one just came out. There were Ephraimites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab to live there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left there with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other named Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahalon and Kilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. All right, so this is in essence, we probably won't go much further than that because really this whole little section of verses is just meant to give us the backstory as to what's going on. So the famine, like I said, is often seen as judgment for God, but it could have been from many other sources, as well as just straight up results of the choices that the culture and the people of God have been making. From the last chapter that we read in Judges, right? Obviously, the culture of God's kingdom was very hard to find, and even though people might be obeying the rules of God that Moses left behind, they weren't obeying the principles of God's kingdom. And that's what happens when religion comes in. And I've seen it happen in non-religious formats as well, where people obey the rules, check the boxes in a on a list, but their hearts are far from it, right? They have no desire to please the corporation, but they will obey the corporation so that they keep getting their paycheck. That's the sort of the mindset. So these guys would go through the motions of sacrifice and ceremony and celebrations because they didn't want God to kill them. But in between all of that, they worshiped other gods. They stole from each other. They charged interest to one another, which I mean, I don't know if you get this, but charging interest on a loan is like that. There is like you can't find a principle in the Bible that indicates that a loan should ever have interest on it. Definitely not from people, from person to person. And you can find a whole lot more principle in the Bible when it comes to the kingdom that when you loan, you never expect payment. You'd never loan something and say to yourself, well, that, I'll get all that back. No, 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 no. You trust God to take care of it. I don't, that's all I can say. All right. I can't break it all down for you, but trust me. Feel free to go after it yourselves. But it is fascinating. So let's see. Like I said, the enemy had plenty of opportunity to come in and have control of things. The selfish nature of the people would have destroyed many of the crops because they would have planted on the 7th year when they were supposed to let things rest. They would have overplanted. They would have there was a lot. They would have hoarded things in barns. They would have built more barns and bigger barns. There was a lot of opportunity here that could have caused the famine. So Elimelech decides to move to another land, at least until the famine is over. And at some level, right, that makes sense. He's got a wife. He's got 2 sons. He's probably got land that he's supposed to be farming, but it's a famine. You can't make any money. And so he's got, just for what it's worth, right? He's Elimelech is what they call a proper Jew. He had really good bloodlines. He was a judge in his tribe, which doesn't necessarily mean that he was like a judge of the nation like Samson was supposed to be. He was a judge in that he was one that people would come to say, all right, if we obeyed the laws of God, how would we apply it to this circumstance? He's one of the many judges throughout the land. Many tribes had multiple judges. They'd be in large clans, large families. They'd all have a judge. He was one of them. So he was somebody who knew the laws of Moses really well. He was considered to be very blessed by God because he had 2 sons. Now, that's just the way people thought because they didn't value females. And sons were the only ones that could carry on your name. Having 2 sons was considered a double blessing from the Lord. And it also, bode well for him when it came to leadership within the clan or the tribe. And Bob's like, "You mean it's kinda like a rich guy going to church?" That was a little actually, yes, actually, yeah, I get yeah. Yeah, pretty much. That's the that's pretty much the way it plays out. Yeah. Rich guy shows up at church and not that he announces it, but people find out and you automatically assume, "Ooh, the hand of God's blessing is upon him." You don't know how he made his money, but you just assume we got to get him on the finance committee. No. Maybe we should make him an elder. He's only been here 2 weeks. Yeah, but he's got money. Similarly, they would have looked at somebody who shows up, a Jewish man shows up into a Jewish community with 2 sons, and they'd be like, "Ooh, clearly favored of God. All right, well, we probably should put him in charge of something." All right, enough about that. So he followed God's ways in a land of chaos. I just want to say, generally, he was a good guy. He probably wasn't completely immersed in what has become the culture of the people of God. And he took his wife and his 2 sons, and they went to live for a while in the country of Moab. Now, the Moab, right, Moabites, they were descendants of Lot and Lot's oldest daughter after Sodom. Crazy story, right? They think that the only man left on earth is their father because Sodom is so decimated by fire and brimstone. They can't imagine, like, I don't know why they didn't walk anywhere. I don't. I mean, they walked up into a mountainside, and they went into a cave, and they just looked out on this desolate plain that used to be their, lush fields and huge cities, and they said the whole world has come to an end. Our dad's the only one left alive, and they get him so drunk that he has no idea he's having sex with them. I again just no concept in my physical being as to how that could happen. I mean, I do have alcohol. I do drink alcohol, but I can't imagine. I can't. None of the rest of that scenario makes sense to me. But be that as it may, it happened, and the Moabites came out of it. And so, at some level, they're kind of family, but not really. They're more just their neighbors, right? They're over there. They're not experiencing famine, which means it's more of a localized famine, which again speaks more so to the fact that these guys probably overplanted, uh, didn't allow the land to rest. So water was of short supply because they took it all, so to speak, to run it through their irrigation systems, which were complex and amazing for their time. But anyways, it doesn't really matter. Moabites were doing fine, so they went that direction. Now, this is kind of crazy. Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, 2 sons. They went to Moab and lived there. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. Wait, she's left with her 2 sons. Like this is such a quick verse. What in the world does this mean? Now, well, let me get into this. Basically, they show up and their lives fall apart. That's one of the things that this means. They show up at Moab, and life changes suddenly. I mean, a move is a pretty substantial life changing event. We've had plenty in our lives. We're actually really good at it, but it is unsettling. Everywhere we go, we try to, establish ourselves, so to speak, and yet we don't seem to be there very long. So it's unsettling to move. And I think that, for them, they probably had spent most, if not their entire lives in Bethlehem. So they move They got to make new friends, neighbors, business associates, trade, where the markets are. Like there's so many things they got to figure out. And then it just says Elimelech dies. So she left the land of her home to be over here, and now her husband's dead. But she does have her two sons. She arrived with resources. They got a house, they got in the city. Maybe they rented a house, maybe they bought a house, I don't know. The two boys found work. They had resources. Life was starting to maybe come together. And then the husband died. Maybe soon after they arrived. I don't know. I mean, we don't know. It just seems sudden in the story. And the fact that it's covered with virtually no preliminaries speaks to the fact that soon after they moved, he was gone. He did not establish himself as a leader of any sort in Moab. Now, there's a chance that Elimelech might have been sickly. And maybe that's why they didn't stay in Judah. Now that makes sense to me because it was considered really in almost immoral to abandon their tribe during a hardship. As far as the Jewish culture was concerned, if we're dealing with a famine and you just pick up your family and leave, a family that's considered to be blessed of God because of the two sons, and you're a leader in this community, a tribal judge, and you just walk away during a difficult time that we believe is coming from God, none of that's helpful to us. And the fact that he did this means there probably was something much deeper, and that could have been a physical issue. He could have been looking at his own life going, all right, I'm not going to make it. I need food. I need water. I'm weak. I'm physically not doing well. And I don't know if I'll survive a famine. Maybe he and Naomi are sitting around going, what are we going to do? And the sons are like, Dad, we'll follow you wherever you want to go. We can't plow the fields. It's not going to grow. We've got nothing to generate funding right now. We can't even buy you food and water to help you physically. Let us pack everything up like we can do. We're physically able to do that. Let's get you on a cart. Let's go to Moab. We have money. Let's spend the money staying alive. And they get there, and it basically didn't help. Now, remember, part of the leaving, the reason why it was considered bad, one of the reasons why it was considered bad to leave during a time of suffering was, one, Elimelech was considered a blessed man. So you're taking a blessing out of a difficult situation, making it more difficult. Secondly, they considered suffering from God to be a way to purify themselves so that they could then be blessed in the future. It was like a cleansing. Now, I've heard that story so many times in my life, right? And I'm sure you have as well. Well, you're going through a difficult time because God's got to purge you of the bad stuff in your life. Pure gold is heated in the fire. And if you don't go through the fire, the dross is not able to come to the top and be scraped away by the hand of God so that you come forth from the furnace. Sorry. Pure gold. Hang on. Now, that kind of illustration has been a part of my growing up. It was just part of my growing up. I often heard how suffering is a gift from God because it's actually a blessing, right? And they go to 1 Peter or is it First Peter? And they talk about how all these bad things will happen, that in the end, you will be found worthy. You'll be found without flaw. You'll be fine. You'll be a bride without spot. It goes on and on. It's a big, fat, hairy deal to suffer for Jesus and suffer for the Lord. And it all comes from God. So he makes you suffer, and then he comes in and blesses you for suffering that he made happen anyways. It's bizarre. And it's not the heart of the Father. He's not going to cause an entire nation to suffer or an entire tribe to suffer so that he can cleanse them from their bad ways. Now, he will allow you to sit in the path that you've created. That's what that word sin means. The wages of sin is you sit in the path you created. He does allow that. And they are sitting in the path that they created. They're blaming God for it because that alleviates them of any responsibility. And when the famine's over, they can all say, there, we've been cleansed of God. We can go back to doing whatever we want. It's a ridiculous pattern. And yet they did it and we do it. And everybody in between did it as well. We have to be really careful because our perception of who God is and how he operates impacts the way that we represent him on this earth. And many parents and pastors and professors, there's the other P. You like that? I alliterated that on the fly. I haven't done that in a long time. They all perform, another one, that's good, their practices of pontification. Sorry, I'm getting ridiculous. All right. But the way you perceive God indicates the way you got to represent him. And if you think that he causes suffering so later he can bring you blessing, then you'll do the same. And you'll call it discipline, and you'll call it love, and you'll call it discipleship. And it's not. And it's not. So Elimelech, he left, and many people are probably very upset with him for doing that. And leaving the tough discipline of the Lord to go live life in an easier place was not considered a good thing. It was considered abandonment, and some would have even considered it blasphemous because of all those things we just covered. All right. Wow. Now Naomi is, after he's dead, she's now being overseen by her two sons. They decide to work, or to stay, sorry. They probably got work or had work. They were making money. They each took on wives, Orpah and Ruth. Many believe Ruth was connected to royalty, that she was some sort of princess in the Moabitess system. Not that she was like next in line to be queen or anything, but she was considered, part of the royal family. And about the only people that we really recognize around here in America is the British royal family. And we watch it with curiosity, sometimes morbid curiosity, sometimes for pure entertainment, but we watch it. So we understand that there's a lot of royals that are around, but we don't know their names. I'm sure people in England probably do. But she was royalty of some sort. And she, after she got married, she clearly fully embraced the Jewish God and the Jewish teachings. And she became, all that Naomi would ever want. They got along great. And then Orpah, she was considered to be very beautiful, also loved God. She followed the one God concept, which is, would have been taught pretty clearly by Elimelech to his sons and his wife. And so I have little doubt that they knew what they were talking about when they when they started to arrange these marriages. And the daughters-in-law, the wives, they just fully embraced it. For at some level, you figure they've been worshiping multiple gods their whole lives. This probably seemed very freeing to worship one God who's all powerful, all knowing, who is holy and just, who loves you. It had to be refreshing. There you go. She was left with her 2 sons. Verse 4, they married Moabite women, one named Orpah, the other named Ruth, and they had lived there about 10 years. So after 10 years, from the time that they arrived, both sons are now dead. Now, people in Israel, they would have looked at this and said, well, this is clearly God's judgment, right? For choosing to leave when you should have stayed. The famine's over. You didn't come back. You chose to leave during God's purging, and now he has purged you of all your blessing. You lost your husband. You lost your sons. You're now a stranger in a foreign land. Your daughters-in-laws are also foreigners. They're not one of us. You are literally left alone. Like that's Ruth. Sorry, not Ruth. Naomi was in a tight spot. I'm guessing that she had to be devastated. She came with wealth. She came with a husband. She came with sons, which, of course, her husband would have been the provider. The sons would have been her inheritance and future providers. And now she's probably feeling lost, alone, desperate, empty, poor, and just generally, culturally, being a widow was not a good spot to be. You are not given resources. You are not given a whole lot of hope. You are usually given a place outside the city for people to bring you, not goods. What do I want to say? Charity. You became a charity case if you were a widow. And that's where, in essence, that's where this little paragraph ends. Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. She was left without any provision and without any inheritance, at least in the Moabite world, right? And that's really what she has to determine. What is she going to do next? Where is she going to go? Does she stay? Because I'm guessing both Ruth and Orpah were like, we have connections. Ruth is like, I'm somewhat connected to the leadership realm here. I'm sure we could find a place, an apartment. I'm sure we could find someone's property that we could live on. I'm sure we could find enough to survive. I'm sure there's people that would help take care of us. And Orpah's probably thinking, yeah, I could talk to my family. There could be places that we could all go. I really believe that the 2 girls were talking to Naomi from a concept, from a position, not a concept, but from a position of, let's all stay together and make this work. We can figure this out. But Naomi is approaching it from a different perspective because she's probably heard those whispers for the last 10 years that we abandoned the discipline of God and now we're paying the price. And she's got a choice to make. And we'll see what that choice is next week. I know you know already, but feel free to read ahead. We'll see what the choice is next week on The Epic Narrative.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast on any platform you use. You can also reach out to Bob for questions or booking at thebobswitzer.com or email him at thebobswitzer@gmail.com. See you next week, guys.